Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus, your pushback channel. And thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you're driving along in your car or your truck, or stick in those earbuds and listen to it in public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the UK government is decided to quite, I wouldn't say harshly, but vigorously prosecute a number of climate change protesters. Now, they got, I think there was 5 of them all up, and they got, I think, 4 or 5 year sentences apiece. There was one, a young woman in her early 20s, and I think late 50s was the oldest. Now, the so-called mastermind and leader, main agitator that was there has got a long history of agitation. Also, has been arrested, as I understand it, a number of times. He's tried various things, like activism about vegetarianism, or about feminism, or pretty much any leftist cause, and looks at the ponytail, the whole thing. And so he got, I think, 5 years in prison. Now, I don't know how long they'll actually serve, because again, it's a very politicized area of world affairs at the moment. The globalists and the United Nations and so on are really very much behind all this activism and supporting it, funding it, providing logistical support, and so on. So whether they'll serve 4 or 5 years, or whether there'll be various dispensations and they'll be out in 6 months is hard to say. I've noticed that when people do get arrested and put in prison for doing pro-globalist activism, which climate change stuff clearly is pro-globalist activism, then very quietly their sentences are reduced for all sorts of excuses, prison overcrowding, or good behaviour, or they reduce the sentence to say weekend detention only, or nighttime detention only, and so effectively the person is not suffering a prison sentence at all. So and they get to stay in free government lodging, halfway house, and all this sort of stuff, and they get all sorts of government benefits. So they're not really suffering. Now, some of these people come from quite well-to-do families, so they, I can't imagine they'll suffer any to any great extent over the longer term. Now, I just want to sort of have a look at the justice situation overall here. I was quite surprised when I saw these sentences. Typically, the sentences that climate change protesters get, no matter how much mayhem and disruption or damage they cause, typically the prison sentences are like 2 or 3 months, and then with time off for good behaviour and time off for any time they've already served in detention, waiting trial or something like that, then the 3 months can quickly turn into 3 weeks, and they're back on the street again. Now, for a pampered kid who comes from a wealthy environment, 3 weeks in prison is probably not a pleasant experience, but nonetheless, there'll be alongside the plebeian lowlifes that they sneer at day in, day out, and that alone would be a sobering experience. Nonetheless, the penalties are very light that they've received. So when I read this in the media, I was quite shocked. Now, understandably, the leftist media that usually is or is always in full support of climate activism, no matter how damaging or dangerous it is, and take a very purely ideological position rather than a practical one. They're outraged that the penalties are too severe. The United Nations has said that they're too severe. The Gay Lesbian Alliance for Climate Change has said they're too severe. What other proof do you need? If the Gay Lesbian Coalition for Climate Change says it's a bad decision by the judge, well, then it's a bad decision. Now, I've noticed that if somebody misgenders somebody and gets a prison term, and that is just. That is just. They misgendered them. They caused hurt, and they're fucking Nazis. Fucking Nazis, and they should go to prison for 1,000 years. I mean, this person only got 6 months for misgendering someone. They should have got 6 million. So they're very, they're hardly consistent, and their determination of what penalty should be handed out are purely ideological. Now, we need to then come to the role of government in this. I almost choked on my coffee when I read the government, UK government, this is government position on this, where there are all sorts of cries for the government to intervene and reduce the sentences of these people, because they're only good people. They only just want what's best. And so what if they cause a lot of damage? They're saving the planet. They're saving the planet from fucking Hitler. So therefore, they shouldn't get prison at all, or slap on the wrist type sentences. So that there's a lot of screaming, crying, asking or demanding, insisting the government intervene to lighten their sentences or overturn the sentences altogether. And this is the bit that made me gag. A government spokesman or spokesperson has come out and said, "Oh no, this is purely a matter for the prosecution service." And spokesman or spokesperson has come out and said, "Oh no, this is purely a matter for the prosecution service, and we don't get involved politically. Well, the justice system is not political in this country. In no way is it political. There's nothing we can do. This is purely a matter of justice." And it's pure. You lying fucks! They are intervening at all levels. Do you think the guy who put posters or stickers, whatever it was, around, who said it's okay to be white? This is in Britain. He got 2 years in prison. You think that wasn't politically motivated? Pretty much every case that involves the globalist project, multi-tier policing, and recently there was very destructive riots in part of Leeds in Yorkshire in Britain, and the order was given to the police that don't antagonize people. Don't you upset those brown people. How dare you upset them? Run away. Run away from these rioters. Do not attempt to. Do you think they'd have run away if it was people were, waving the Union Jack and they're all white? I don't think so. So we've got multi-tier. So the entire justice system has been politicized top to bottom. You speak out against mass migration or against question it even, or against anything that's part of the globalist project, and the law enforcement will come out and they'll come after you. And part of the wider globalist project, of course, is to create social division and social breakdown. So forcing 99% of the population to tiptoe around the less than 1% of trans people. That's a way you cause. That's a method, a device for causing social breakdown and to causing social disruption and sowing social distrust. And the police and the justice system will aggressively protect that, whilst at the same time aggressively working towards the undermining of British society. Now, this is all political, of course. Political decisions are made, and whether the government intervenes directly and makes a phone call saying, "Hey, see those black and brown rioters there? Don't upset them. Just run away from them. Just leave." Whether that's done directly from the senior levels of government, or they ensure that all the senior levels of the police in that area or any area all across the country are of a political brand and mindset and attitude where they would do that without having to be asked. It doesn't matter which way it happens, but it's clearly happening. But again, there were some people not even demonstrating; they're having a march with the British flag, or it could have been the English flag. Anyway, an English or British flag in London, and the police response was brutish, tough. You step out of line one bit and you are, and this sort of thing. Why did they not have that same attitude with the rioters in Leeds? Why do they not have that same approach to policing as they did with the hordes that were marching about Gaza and all that sort of stuff. The police are very hands off there, and they come out with limp-wristed excuses, similar to the excuse for this, during the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, where the head of the Secret Service, we couldn't put agents on the roof because it had a slope on it. They might have fallen off and hurt their little selves. And this is the same with the police. They use that same rationale of argument. There's just so many of them. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. We are helpless. But they're super tough and muscular when it comes to putting white people in line. So this idea that the government says, there's nothing we can do. The justice system stands separate from politics. Oh, you fucking liars. So anyway, coming back to the sentence. This is the first time, certainly, that I've seen long sentences, anything above 2 or 3 months, being given to climate protesters. In Australia, no matter how much disruption the climate protesters cause, they at best will get a fine, and they're back out on the street. In in fact, many occasions, they don't even get a fine. In a number of cases, the judge is hearing the matter, who are themselves radical activists. This is something else that amazes me. If they wanted a radical climate change sympathetic activist to hear that case in England about those climate activists, they could have effortlessly put an activist judge. Instead, they put a judge in there to hear the case who was least likely to be moved by ideological claims of social justice. That's no accident. So that was prearranged. And this is another way how the body politic prearranges outcomes. They just make sure a very sympathetic or unsympathetic, as the case may be, judges, is put on to hear the case, and that would alone cause. Now, the judge that is prepared to act on the evidence, which is this judge in the climate case was in Britain, there aren't many of those judges left. Increasingly, the majority of judges are now activists. So they probably had to search around to find a judge that actually would act on the evidence and say, no, you're causing damage and disruption. You'll pay the price for that. You'll get time in prison. My perception will be they won't serve anywhere near 4 or 5 years. They'll be out. I would think if they'd be lucky to still be in there in 12 months' time, but we'll see. But hopefully it'll send a very clear signal to climate activists that you can't get away with this. You're going to be held to account like anyone else would. Do you think people waving the Union Jack, white men waving the Union Jack and stopping the traffic on a highway are causing some sort of disruption while they say that mass migration should stop? Do you think the police would just stand by as they do with climate protesters and do nothing? Of course not. The police would be ordered politically ordered to go in with batons and truncheons and so on, with heavy-handed, arrest those bums and throw them in prison. That would be how they'd react. But so I don't know. I don't think we're seeing a change here in attitude necessarily. I think the government, as in UK, the government will become more aggressive in pursuing the climate goals and targets, and then we'll say, well, you don't need to march in the streets anymore because we're already destroying Britain and making energy unaffordable and unreliable. We're doing all the things you want anyway, so stop your protesting, because if you protest too much, you'll give a negative image to the climate agenda, and we're pursuing it aggressively anyway because we're just a bunch of globalist World Economic Forum stooges, and that's what they want. So we're doing what we're told. So I think it's more in the wider political and the marketing aspects, if you will, of these policies. You've been Tassus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.